I'm so happy to have all of you here tonight. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I am Wendy Burns-Ardolino. I'm the author of Jiggle. If you don't have the book, it is on sale here, and I'm going to do a book signing immediately following this. So, you know, I'm happy to sign any copies you have, whether you brought your own or whether you purchased one tonight, or if you purchase one in the future. Some of my students said, but I don't get paid until Friday, so can you sign it next week? And I said, absolutely. So, yeah, whenever, I'm happy to sign it. And I'm going to read probably 3 sections, and a lot of this work is ethnographic. The idea that I had was to talk about how women experience their bodies. That was my original conception of the idea. And I was really drawn to, quote unquote, the trappings of femininity. And I wanted to ask questions about that. And I started this project with like this big, wide open topic of the trappings of femininity. And in the first year of my graduate program, in cultural studies, began to narrow the topic to foundation garments. And the definition of foundation garments really is any garment that shapes the body. So when I talked to people about it, and I would use the term foundation garments, some people who were older were familiar with the term. Some people who were just into shaping garments knew the term, but it was pretty clear that younger people don't use the term foundation garments. And so I really literally would give people a list of everything that counted, or that I would count as foundation garments. So I interviewed 40 women personally. I did a nationally representative survey, telephone survey, and I didn't personally do all of those surveys myself. I did it in a survey research laboratory, and I used graduate students and undergraduate students. Some of them paid in favors, not the kind you're thinking, but I helped them move and things like that, so that we could get, and we ended up with 267 telephone survey interviews. And then I also did work in the Maidenform Archive at the U.S. History Museum in the Archive Center, where all the ephemera from Maidenform was transferred upon the closing of the plant in Bayonne, New Jersey. Maidenform Worldwide is still a corporation some of you might be familiar with. And so that gave me a glimpse into the industrial history, and also a view of manufacturing and a view of that company's perspective on women and women's bodies and what women needed. So that was very interesting for me. And then also I used trade journals and women's journals, you know, like Cosmopolitan and Ladies' Home Journal and all of the women's magazines, Red Book and things like that, to get at the public discourse surrounding foundation garments. And really ended up starting with girdling as a practice, and moving into an argument that encompassed this notion that girdling had declined as a practice in the late 60s, early 70s. Why was that the case? And then that contemporary shapewear had actually seen a resurgence in the 80s and into the 90s, and is now a thriving industry. I don't know if how many of you go to department stores and look in the intimate apparel or the lingerie department, as it used to be called, but it's filled, you know, walls and walls of shaping garments these days. And they're called shapers and slimmers and smoothers and trimmers, and they do all that and more. And that's really where this is all coming from. And of course, bras are a big part of this as well. I mean, the idea of the push-up bra, the idea of underwires, the idea of strapless bras, bustiers, any of those things are in here. So I'm happy to answer questions. I'm going to read for about 30 minutes, so I'll just get started. This is from Chapter 1. In spite of the contemporary conception that girdles are inventions of days gone by, the practical significance of the work performed by girdles to hold up stockings is worth noting. As an English professor in her late 40s stated, quote, "I never wore a girdle when I was a teenager living in Florida because I never wore stockings. It was too hot. It wasn't until I went away to college in Chicago in 1964 that I bought my first girdles from Sears and Penny's. I had to. I had to have something to attach my stockings to, or even to my over-the-knee socks." End quote. While this story might be common in terms of experience, it is a detail which is both essential to an understanding of girdle history and the history of the practice of girdling. It is significant precisely because it explains the practical necessity of girdles at a time when there were few choices available, other than garter belts, to hold up women's stockings. Fashion writer Hyman Goldberg emphasizes this point in a 1954 article entitled "The Big Squeeze" from Cosmopolitan, and there's a lot of those, so if you like that sort of thing, you'll see a lot of this. Goldberg exclaims, quote, "In the 1890s, some genius attached garters to the bottoms of corsets to serve two purposes, to keep stockings up and corsets down." End quote. This little fact kept most women and their daughters daughters in girdles until the advent of pantyhose and tights. All-in-one hosiery gained popularity in the late 60s and early 70s. As the younger generation rejected traditional corsetry, they became increasingly body, diet, and exercise conscious, and they chose to don dancewear, leotards, and tights. This idea that the generation of the 1960s just let it all hang out seems a bit contrived and false, since younger women did wear pantyhose, tights, and even control-top pantyhose. However, the fact that these inventions brought other options to women in the late 60s and 70s does not change the fact that women of the 30s, 40s, 50s, and even into the 60s wore girdles religiously for many reasons, besides holding up their stockings. Many of the reasons can be directly linked to social and cultural practices that eliminated the option of alternate choices. In fact, many of the women I interviewed articulated this lack of choice in the face of social conventions. They commented, and this is a variety of comments linked together, "The practice was just assumed. It was the right thing to do. No questions were asked." End quote. The practice of girdling in both public and private spheres operates within the parameters of social control. There are rationales given and accepted from authorities ranging from societal norms voiced by parents, aunts, and grandmothers to medical and scientific discourses, all of which advocate girdling as a regulated practice. The medical and scientific discourses, which find their way into popular women's magazines, are designed to persuade women to wear girdles for their health. Journalist Carrie McMichael described such a rationale in a 1941 issue of the Journal of Home Economics, where she argued for the need for wearing proper corsetry. She explained, quote, "Corsets must safely enclose the vital organs, giving pressure where it is needed and avoiding pressure where it will do harm. The important abdominal organs must never be pressed downward. They are safest when pressed upward." End quote. The concept was that women's organs were not safe where they existed naturally. This was but one example of medical and scientific rationales that was used as reinforcement for the practice of girdling. In 1942, an issue of Hygeia, the columnist Jane Dixon expounded upon the weakness of the female frame based on an evolutionary argument. She declared, quote, "The human body is not designed to stand and walk upright. The vital organs, it is true, are sheathed with muscular straps, which in youth are firm, and if the general posture is erect, hold the abdomen in a flat line. As the years go by, these muscles generally become more or less flaccid, letting the abdomen protrude gradually. Women develop middle-age spread. The spine grows tired of supporting in an erect position the body that was intended to go on all fours. Unless something is done about it, the spine gradually sways forward at the small of the back, where the strain of supporting the abdomen gives the backbone its most severe work. And as the incurved lordosis backline appears, the abdomen protrudes in a compensating curve. Neither exercise nor any other known remedy can restore again these muscles. The only other solution to the problem is externally supplied support." Oh, wow. Okay, end quote. So there's the rationale for girdling from the medical and scientific. I mean, there's no way I could have made that up, right? But wearing a girdle was not just prescribed by these discourses in women's magazines. Some employers also required women to wear girdles to work. 2 of the 40 women I interviewed noted that girdles were required as part of their uniform at work. A 51-year-old woman from New Jersey stated, "At Howard Johnson's, they required us waitresses to wear girdles. There was talk they didn't want any jiggling. I was too skinny to be checked, but the word was if you were jiggling too much, they would take you aside and tell you to wear the proper undergarments, which meant girdles." End quote. Another woman in her late 50s remembered a similar requirement when she worked in a women's shoe department in Pittsburgh in 1960. She explained, "I had to wear a girdle under my skirt or dress to work at Kaufman's because they, the management, said we shouldn't be bending over without some kind of support. I think it was even printed in our work packets. Girdles were required." End quote. However, women did not only wear girdles in order to fulfill the prescriptives of the institutions of health and work. Women also wore girdles in order to follow the demands of fashion and etiquette. As a 50-year-old woman from South Georgia recalled, quote, "Girdles were just what we wore. Anything less, for instance, garter belts, would have made us Jezebels. We were supposed to be young ladies, proper girls. Those were the rules. That's what we knew." End quote. In Ellen Mellenkoff's Social History, What We Wore, I think that's a great title for a book, several women describe similar experiences. Rosemary Kimball commented, "We had to wear girdles because God forbid someone should see something move." Tristine Berry supported such a supposition as she noted, quote, "I remember panty girdles in the 9th grade in 1962. We wore straight skirts, and without a girdle, your fanny would move, considered very crude. In the late 70s, we all wore straight skirts with our suits and never considered a panty girdle. Interesting." End quote. These personal accounts suggest the absolute necessity for wearing a girdle at least until the late 1960s because nice girls did not wear garter belts and they certainly didn't jiggle. All right. I'm going to flash forward to, I talked a little bit about bras and the importance of the breasts and bras that, interplay in that relationship. During many of my in-depth interviews, women detailed their experiences of wearing foundation garments to satisfy rigorous social dress codes. Women used such language as socially acceptable, appropriate, and required to describe moments when they felt compelled to wear special or additional foundation garments to special events. Many women discussed at length their experiences regarding the presentation of their breasts at formal occasions. Several women described the need to wear strapless bras to proms under dresses that were themselves strapless or thinly strapped, as in the case of spaghetti straps or single shoulder styles. Women explained that not wearing a bra under such a dress was not an option in spite of the fact that strapless bras brought with them many problems. Strapless bras frequently needed to be stuffed. An 88-year-old woman from Chicago commented that, quote, "I use Kleenex and Kotex to keep the thing up." End quote. Since strapless bras kept sliding down to their waists, some women had friends who helped them remember to pull them up throughout the prom. But a 62-year-old Italian woman laughingly recalled, quote, "I watched in horror as my friend danced at senior prom with the boy of her dreams while her strapless bra actually worked its way around the back of her dress." End quote. However, these stories are not limited to women over 50. A 20-something woman explained, quote, "I felt like a mummy at my senior prom in a bra that went all the way down to my waist. It really didn't work for me." End quote. The fact that many women chose to wear strapless bras, in spite of the fact that these bras did not work for them, suggests the degree of social pressure to adhere to a dress code requiring strapless bras to be worn under formal dresses. However, several women discussed their disappointment with strapless bras, long-line bras, paste-ons, and even contemporary bustiers. They commented that these foundations were, quote, "bulky, didn't fit right, or moved around too much," end quote. Still others sought other options, blurring the lines between wearing and not wearing a bra by using paste-ons. And some people call them pasties, whatever you want to call them. Most women reported that breast size was a major consideration in this operation. One 20-year-old from Virginia noted, quote, "I wore the cups that stick to your chest right under your boobs to homecoming with a strapless dress. Luckily, mine were small enough that the cups stayed on, but they were a pain to peel off." End quote. A 30-year-old from North Carolina commented that her breasts were a D cup, so she actually had to wear 2 paste-ons per breast. But she also noted that they did work. Still, a third woman complained, quote, "I tried the stick-on bras. They do not work if you are any larger than a C cup, end quote. Finally, an 81-year-old from South Carolina explained, after a dinner party, I stood in the shower for 3 hours trying to get the things off and was left with 2 bullseyes on my chest. End quote. Many women who tried paste-ons considered them a viable option to strapless bras. In fact, for all their difficulty, many women preferred wearing paste-ons to struggling with strapless bras. But this prompted me to question several women about the need to wear anything under these kinds of formal dresses. After all, most formal dresses are lined, some even have cups sewn into the lining. But every woman I talked to voiced her discomfort with the idea of going without a bra or a bra option, a slip with a built-in bra, paste-ons, bustier, strapless, long line or not, under formal dress. In fact, 30 of the 40 women I interviewed suggested that the codes of formal dress required formal foundations. So that was humorous. While the embedded femininity in foundation garments may make them appear less likely to be the site of contested cultural meanings, a 20-year-old from Virginia relayed this experience concerning her best friend's prom attire. Quote, for our senior prom, her mother bought her this pimped-out black lacy corset to wear with her dress. I thought it was hilarious because it looked like a stereotypical hooker outfit piece, and this little Gap J. Crew happy girl. She wore it once for that night and then gave it to me, and it remains in my bedroom at home for a decoration and a laugh. I love that thing. End quote. This anecdote conveys the message of the stereotypical virgin-whore dichotomy that is so often critiqued by feminist scholars, but it also pokes fun at the ridiculousness of this often practiced dichotomy of ideal femininity. As the friend wears the stereotypical foundation garments of the whore, she also wears the stereotypical persona and most probably the dress of a virgin. Now the garment hangs alone after being worn only once in a play of ideal femininity that is laughable in the days of post-prom. In a similarly humorous scenario, another undergraduate details her experience with a push-up bra. She explains, quote, I bought a push-up bra, and when I got home, I tried it on. I hated the way it looked, so unnatural, so I returned it and never wore it again. I showed it to my boyfriend, though, and he cracked up, and we named it the Rocket Bra. I had to include that one because it's so funny. All right. In contrast, women in the late 40s and 50s embraced the conical shape of the breast, perhaps synonymous with the rocket bra. While technology in the form of foam rubber continued to contribute to bra padding, the use of wire and underwire to achieve conical breast shape intensified. In their seminal fashion history of the bra, Uplift, The Bra in America, another great title. I mean, if you get into this, there's just great titles out there. Jane Farrell Beck and Colleen Gow explain the significant role of wire in shaping ideal 1950s style breasts. Wire became an essential component in the brassiere industry. With the war over, chromium-plated wire was again available, and manufacturers promoted the efficacy of flexible, spiral, flat, and round wires. An emphasis on rigidity hit a new peak with the advertising of the 50s Underwire Brassieres. They were marketed primarily to large-breasted customers at first, but were soon discovered to thrust and uplift smaller bosoms to new heights. The numerous configurations of heavy wire separating the breast, spiral wire under the breast, flexible wire over the breast, branching and circular wires used by designers in every company were a torturer's tour de force. And that was a quote from Gow and Beck. In fact, fashion's changing ideal breast shape fluctuates with shifting social, cultural, and particularly economic factors, as in the case of the availability of wire after World War II. Colonialism provides yet another example. Anthropologist Londa Scheibinger explains. Quote, colonial relations also affected perceptions of the breast. Late 19th century anthropologists classified breasts by beauty in the same way they measured skulls for intelligence. The ideal breast for all races was once again young and virginal. Europeans preferred the compact hemispherical type, found it was said only among whites and Asians. The much maligned breasts of African, especially Hottentot women, were dismissed as flabby and pendulous, similar to the udders of goats. When women of African descent were portrayed sympathetically, they were shown having firm, spherical breasts, end quote. And I only included that quote to show like the ridiculousness of anthropological discourse during that period, much in the way that I included the section about the medical discourse that said our bodies were made to go on all fours. So I want to contextualize that. That is not my belief. Although Scheibinger's example comes courtesy of a 1936 historical gynecological compendium, the case of privileging breast shape and size continues to be a function of contemporary fashion and dress codes. I found an article in InStyle magazine listed under a column titled Asset Management, Tips on Making the Most of Your Figure, with the subtitle Learning Curve, which supported Scheibinger's example of privileging certain types of breasts. The play on words actually supports the analysis of the work of bras in shaping the breast while reinforcing the understanding that the breast can never exist in culture as unfashioned. The text of the article reads, quote, "Women have tried many a fad to help create the ideal silhouette on top. The latest innovation from Jockey achieves the goal without water, gel, or unwanted bulk." In stores now. The new smooth contour bra is made of light, soft foam that responds to the heat of your body, comfortably molding to your curves without a gap to be found. Smaller sized women, in particular, will appreciate the slight enhancement of the cup. You'll look bigger, but not inordinately so. And the seamless surface looks smooth under a fitted cotton t-shirt, end quote. The cultural production of the fitted t-shirt and the need for women to look smooth underneath it produced a bra to wear with a t-shirt. The t-shirt is itself imbued with all kinds of significance: American rebellion, patriotism, sexuality, youthfulness, and so on. This bra and the work it does shaping breasts, particularly those of smaller sized women, proffers a normalizing option as it helps to, quote, create the ideal silhouette up top, end quote, for June 2003. Not surprisingly, and perhaps not coincidentally, the shape of the bra replicates the colonial breast ideal detailed by Scheibinger, which I think is kind of a damning indictment. I wanted to show you that this book does have pictures because I was asked this earlier by a close friend of mine. And the reason I'm showing you this particular picture is because this is an ad, and it looks like an ad for girdles and bras, right? Well, the sponsor of the ad is DuPont, so it just lets you know that technology and fabric and, in this case, Lycra, is one of the key profit areas for DuPont. And the text of the ad says, and this is from the 1960s, whatever your size, whatever your weight, you'd look better, feel more controlled and more comfortable in a bra and girdle elasticized with Lycra. So I thought you would enjoy that. And then I'm going to move into a discussion of more contemporary shapewear now. Fashion's slender ideal body continues to take center stage in the commodity fetishism of foundation wear. A good example of this comes from Fashion 101 article. Yeah, they have a section called Fashion 101 in InStyle magazine from October 2004, and it is titled Selecting the Right Body Shaper. The introduction to the article reads, quote, "No garment can whittle a body down 2 sizes, but today's shapewear will help you look better in your clothes. Firm control tummy toners can flatten the abdomen, giving you a sleek fit look, while body shapewear can smooth out bulges or provide an anti-jiggle foundation for form-fitting clothing. Recent improvements include strong but lightweight fabrics that breathe, no more sweating in girdle-like garments, seamless construction, bye-bye telltale lines, and new silhouettes like bike pants, thigh slimmers, and spaghetti strap control slips." End quote. The fetishized object is fashion's ideal body, and these contemporary shapers promise to resolve the problem body, quote, to smooth out bulges or provide an anti-jiggle foundation, end quote. This Fashion 101 example underscores not only the desire for fashion's ideal body, but the desire to solve the problem body, the flawed American woman's body. It also illustrates the longevity of the cult of thinness and the consequent girdle resurgence in the form of contemporary shapewear, even if there is a distancing from the G word through the use of technological advances such as improved microfiber fabrics. When I began this project in the spring of 1999, I could not have predicted the evolution of shapewear into the new millennium. I couldn't. I really couldn't. Nonetheless, the trend has continued. In fact, I just saw on Oprah that they had Stacey London with a whole program about shapewear, and I was like, well, maybe I could capture that and bring a clip, but I don't really think it's necessary. You could go download that from YouTube yourself. Nonetheless, the trend has continued. Another example of the proliferation of shapewear in mainstream culture comes from the Style File from In Style magazine. I'm not picking on them, it's just that they kind of profile this stuff. November 2006, and it's titled, and I have a subscription, Fashion Prop Kit, Shape Up Instantly. The introduction to the product line reads, quote, "These secret weapons lift, tighten, and give you all the right curves." The Style File profiles a hip slip described as, quote, "a deft mixture of spandex and nylon that makes this possibly the finest chemise of all time," end quote. Thus highlighting the effects of new technology on producing a better fitting, better working shaping garment. This technological advancement is part of the culture of improvement and yet another dimension of commodity fetishism. The Style File also recommends the thigh toner. The text reads, quote, "These mid-thigh shapers provide extra toning as well as a smooth line under the skimpiest of pieces," end quote. Once again, the focus is on improving the body using the newest technology, the latest in shapewear. The fetishistic desire for a flabless gym-honed body is exploited by foundation wear manufacturers who employ the discourses of improved technology, color for fabrics, and fashion's ideal body to sell new shapewear lines. In this way, contemporary foundation garments shape not only the bodies of American women, but shape the subjectivities of American women, particularly within fashion and beauty cultures. While the practices of girdling were certainly more monolithic and intrusive than the recommendations for shapewear found in contemporary magazines, there has been a proliferation of the Fashion 101 and fashion emergency discourses. And I don't have to tell you that, right? And with that proliferation of those discourses in popular media in the last decade, entire television programs are now dedicated to fashion and beauty makeovers. Laura. In fact, even the negative prescriptives found in early discourses of girdling have cropped up in television programs such as TLC's What Not to Wear and Entertainment Television's Fashion Emergency, and there are so many more. The discourses of these programs and fashion magazines confirm the use of women's bodies as a locus of social control. Prescriptives for shaping and smoothing the body with the right foundation wear and articulations of fashion don'ts with regard to women's bodies perpetuate the identities of American women as consummate consumers, all you intro to women's studies people, as desiring subjects in pursuit of fashion's ideal body. Thank you. And these hearts, which were my place marks, my children did. And they couldn't be here tonight because this is opening night for T-ball in Fayetteville. So bad on me for scheduling on that night. Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm happy to take questions if you have any. I feel so bad. You're all like squinched in. Yeah.
Did the lady who took the ball back, did she really take it back after she wore it?
I think she just tried it on.
Oh, okay.
She didn't, you know, she bought it, she brought it home, she tried it on, and then she took it back.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What inspired you to write this book?
You know, I wrote, you know, when you go to graduate school, just for you undergraduates, they ask you what you plan to do your research on, and you're like, ooh, I didn't know they were going to ask me that. I just wanted to go to graduate school, right? You have to have a plan. Whether you follow it or not tends to be a whole other thing. But I wrote in my application to the Cultural Studies PhD program at George Mason University that I plan to do research in the culture of femininity and to explore issues of the trappings of femininity and how we're bound to that as a culture. And that, I mean, I thought that was a cultural study. So, and I really had no idea how I was going to do it at all. But that's what my idea was. And then I went into my first, I think it was my second semester when they made me write a paper, you know, that was supposed to have something to do with my larger project. And I was like, ooh, my larger project, what will that be? I have no idea. And it went from there. So, and it was so funny. I had this great relationship with the interlibrary loan people, because they were like, we actually read your stuff when it comes in for interlibrary loan before we email you that it's here, because it's so interesting. You know, what are you doing with all of this, you know? And when I was reading you know, back in the day, you guys who only work with digital databases have no idea, but, you know, there are like whole archives of material and stuff that are actually in paper. And so I used the Guide to Periodical Literature to look up the pieces that were from, like, predated, like the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and the 30s. I even have, from Life magazine, they had a big spread on Warner's had a fashion show, and they were putting out the latest in Lastex foundation garments, and one of the subtitles is something like tap dancing to show the flexibility of her garment, and they actually have a woman tap dancing from like 1937 Life magazine. So it just took on a life of its own, and I just kept following the thread, you know, and it would just steamroll. Yes, Julia.
When did you find time to write with your schedule?
You know, even right now, I write a lot, and I actually, one of my colleagues was talking about how much she writes, and I was like, how does she find time to write, because she's been so productive. But my best time, and I probably shouldn't tell the students this, my best time for writing is in the morning. So what I tend to do now that my children are in school is I tend to stay at home in the morning and write, and then come to campus in the afternoon and do my advising and my teaching in the afternoon, because my mind is clearest first thing in the morning. But when my children were really little, I actually wrote my dissertation, honest to God, on 12 hours of daycare a week. So my husband would take Adrian, my oldest, who is adopted, and he would take him to a woman's house who had children in her home, and he would take him at like 1 o'clock because he worked at night at Outback, and I would be sitting there like, okay, can you just go? Can you go? And then he would leave, and I would just like nail myself to the chair and just sit there. I mean, I remember like having this arthritic moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm getting carpal tunnel. But I had to, or I wouldn't have finished. And I defended my dissertation when I was 7 months pregnant with my second son. So what happened was, when I became pregnant, it was kind of an accident. You know how those things happen. That's not covered in the book, though, okay? That's another book. When I became pregnant, and I told my husband, I think I'm pregnant, and so, and I was like, oh my God. And then I was like really happy about it. And then everybody kept saying, oh, you'll never finish your dissertation. You'll never graduate. You'll never. And I was like, what is wrong with you people? Do you not know who I am as a person? When I say I'm going to do something, and it made me like even more incensed that I would do it no matter what. And so I was going to do it before that baby was born. So, yeah.
Maybe you should have cried when you said that, because when Hillary Clinton cried, based on that similar question, she won my vote. So
yeah, well, yeah. Well, if you buy the book and you read the dedication and the acknowledgments, you'll see like the blood, sweat, and tears. It's all in there. And I can, if you really want to know, I'll tell you like all the gory details on another occasion. You know, I'm like full disclosure on all this stuff. So I want you to know the joy and the pain. Any more questions?
Did you do any like product testing during the
product testing? You know what? This is I'm lucky. I probably didn't get arrested by like mall police, because one of the things I did was I would like go around in the department stores and take the hang tags. You know, the paper tags that hang on the garments that like show a picture of the garment, because I like wanted to know what I was looking at. So you know, like it would be like Hanes Simply Smooth or something. So I would take the hang tag so I could document all the things I had looked at. And I like brought them to class as like proof. that I had done this research, you know. And I had this sociology professor, and he was just so embarrassed by anything womanly whatsoever, you know. And he just would blush, and I'd be showing my hang tag and saying, and I found this out, and I found that out, and here's a survey, and yeah. But I didn't really try much out. I mean, everything was either written down, like there was tons and tons of popular newspaper articles where people had done the testing for me. I didn't really have to, you know.
So you didn't know how far the research had went.
Yeah, I didn't go that route. I just thought that would be like my personal take as opposed to, you know, something that was more scientific, quote unquote. I don't know how scientific it was, but anybody else? Yeah?
How close is the final product of the book to what you submitted?
To my dissertation, you know, it is markedly different. I would say, I mean, I can't tell you how many hours I did in revision, but a lot of that was necessary to convert it to a book, period, because it really wasn't a book when it was a dissertation. It was almost like a series of papers that I had put together, and I had to like get a scheme for how I envisioned the whole thing fitting together. And what was really interesting was because really this is women's studies and cultural studies like merged into one, you know, a feminist lens on cultural studies. And my dissertation advisors were very supportive, but they were all from traditional disciplines. I had my chair was an anthropologist, or I mean, he's still alive, so I should say. My chair is an anthropologist, and then there was a feminist philosopher and a historian and a survey research scientist, a sociology professor. And none of them, all of them had pieces of what you know, they had pieces. So when I would tell them what I wanted to do as a whole project, they would just kind of shake their heads and be like, you know, we're not sure, you know, you're going down the right road. And I actually think it worked out well because in the end, when I gave them the finished product, they could see how it all fit together, you know. But it took like the whole process to get there, really. Yeah. But it took a long time to revise the manuscript into a book. But that's like working with editors from the press, and that's always a little tricky, you know. At least for me. I can't speak for other people. Thank you. Anything else? No? Okay. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Great to be with you.